The atmosphere at Al-Atala was suffocating. Ju-won sat across from Nabi, his fiancée, watching her pick at a salad she didn't want. This marriage was a business transaction, an alliance between two of the most powerful families in Seoul, but today Nabi's eyes were darting toward the entrance. Lily moved through the restaurant like a ghost. As a black woman working in an ultra-exclusive, predominantly Korean establishment, she was used to being invisible, but she saw everything. She had seen Haneul, Ju-won's cousin, whispering in the alleyway with a group of men carrying silenced weapons. She had seen the way Nabi's hand trembled when she checked her phone. As Lily walked past Ju-won to refill his water, she didn't speak. She let a small, folded square of parchment slip from her palm onto his lap. Ju-won didn't flinch. He felt the paper. He waited for her to walk away before glancing down. "Run, they are coming. The kitchen exit is compromised." He didn't panic. He looked at Nabi, whose face was pale. "I need to use the restroom," he said, his voice like grinding stones. He stood up, already dialing his lieutenant. The hunt had begun, but he wasn't the prey. Ju-won didn't go to the restroom. He slipped into the shadows of the hallway, his gun drawn before he even reached the corner. His lieutenant, Min-ho, picked up on the first ring. "Outside, now, full sweep. My cousin has turned." Inside the dining room, the glass shattered. Screams erupted as masked men stormed the front. Ju-won watched from the peripheral shadows. He saw Nabi dive under the table, not in fear but in anticipation. She wasn't surprised. The betrayal tasted like copper in his mouth. Haneul was his blood, the man he had raised like a brother. To think he would use a public restaurant to stage a coup was an insult to their legacy. Ju-won's men arrived like a whirlwind of lead and steel. The exclusive dinner turned into a slaughterhouse within seconds. Amidst the chaos, Ju-won's eyes found Lily. She was huddled behind the bar, her amber eyes wide but steady. She wasn't screaming like the others. She was watching him. He signaled his men to move. "Secure the girl," he commanded, pointing toward Lily, "and find Haneul. I want him alive for now." Ju-won vanished. For 14 days, the underworld of Seoul held its breath. He retreated to a sufhus, a fortress of glass and cold concrete, dismantling the web of Haneul's treachery piece by piece. The evidence was damning. Haneul hadn't just wanted the chair, he wanted Nabi. The two had been sleeping together for months, plotting to turn the alliance into a solo reign. When Ju-won finally faced Haneul in the cellar of the sufhus, there was no anger, only a cold, dead vacuum. "Bloodlines notwithstanding," Ju-won whispered, pressing the barrel of his weapon against Haneul's forehead. "Betrayal is the only sin I don't forgive." One shot ended the lineage. Nabi, however, was a different problem. When he confronted her, she played the victim. "I was scared, Ju-won. Haneul forced me. I'm not ready for the wedding anymore. I need time to heal." Ju-won smiled, a terrifying sight. "Take all the time you need, Nabi. You're no longer my concern." His mind wasn't on his fiancée. It was on the waitress with the steady eyes who had risked her life to drop a note on a killer's lap. He picked up his phone. "Bring me the girl from the restaurant. Her name is Lily." The restaurant had been closed for a week following the incident, but Lily had bills to pay. She had found a shift at a late-night diner in a rougher part of Seoul. As she walked to the bus stop at 2 a.m., the air felt heavy. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the sickly yellow of the streetlights. Two men in charcoal suits stepped out. They didn't look like muggers, they looked like soldiers. "Miss Lily?" one asked. His voice was polite, but his hand was resting near the lapel of his jacket where a holster lived. "Our employer wishes to thank you for your service." "I don't want a reward," Lily said, her heart hammering against her ribs. She backed away, but a second car cut off her retreat. "I just did what was right." "He wasn't asking," the man replied. They didn't hurt her, but the efficiency with which they guided her into the back seat was terrifying. As the child locks engaged with a heavy thud, Lily realized that saving a monster meant you now belonged to the monster. She watched the city lights blur into the distance, heading toward the hills where the fortresses of the elite sat high above the law. Ju-won's penthouse was a temple of minimalism and power. When Lily was ushered in, she found him standing by a floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of dark scotch in his hand. He had shed his suit jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the faint edge of a tattoo crawling up his neck. He turned, and the intensity of his gaze made Lily's breath hitch. He didn't look like a man who had just buried his cousin. He looked like a man who had found a new obsession. "You saved my life," Ju-won said, walking toward her. He stopped just inches away, invading her personal space. The scent of sandalwood and expensive tobacco rolled off him. Why, you knew who I was. Most people would have let the bullet find its mark. Lily stood her ground, though her knees felt weak. I don't like seeing people hunted, even people like you. Ju-won reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. His touch was cold, yet it sent a spark of electricity through her. People like me don't get saved for free, Lily. You've involved yourself in my world. Now I have to decide what to do with you. The tension in the room snapped. Ju-won wasn't a man of many words, he was a man of action. He saw the flicker of fear in Lily's eyes, but beneath it he saw a simmering heat that matched his own. He gripped her waist, pulling her flush against him. The contrast was striking, his pale, scarred hands against her deep, smooth skin. You're trembling, he whispered against her ear, his breath hot. Is it fear or is it something else? Lily tried to push him back, but her hands ended up gripping his forearms. The muscles beneath his shirt were like iron. I want to go home, she lied, her voice breaking. This is your home now, Ju-won growled. He tilted her head back, his mouth hovering just over hers. Nubba was a traitor, my cousin was a ghost. You are the only thing that feels real tonight. He kissed her then, a dark, possessive claim that tasted of scotch and desperation. It wasn't a request, it was a takeover. Lily's head spun as his tongue swept past her lips, demanding a surrender she found herself far too willing to give. In the dark world of the Korean Mafia, she had just become the most dangerous thing of all, the boss's weakness. The weeks that followed were a blur of silk sheets and silent guards. Ju-won did not treat Lily like a guest, nor did he treat her like a prisoner. She was something else entirely, a prize he kept hidden in the clouds. He bought her clothes that cost more than her annual salary at the restaurant, but Lily refused to wear them at first. I'm not your doll, Ju-won, she told him one evening as he watched her from the doorway of the master suite. Ju-won walked over, his eyes dark with a possessiveness that bordered on madness. He didn't care about the clothes. He cared about the way she looked at him, with a mixture of defiance and a hunger she couldn't hide. You saved my life, he reminded her, his hands sliding around her waist. In my world that makes you mine, everything I own is yours, including my protection. Their physical connection became an escape for both. For Lily, it was a descent into a world of sensory overload where Ju-won's touch made her forget the danger. For Ju-won, Lily was the only place where he didn't have to be a monster, even if he loved her with a monstrous intensity. He found himself leaving meetings early just to return to her, a habit that didn't go unnoticed by his inner circle. Nubba was not a woman who accepted being discarded. Though she had told Ju-won she wasn't ready for the marriage, she expected him to crawl back, to beg for the alliance her family provided. When word reached her through a bribed maid that Ju-won was keeping a foreign waitress in his penthouse, her ego shattered. A waitress, Nubba hissed, throwing a crystal vase against the wall of her dressing room. He chooses a commoner over a princess of the syndicate. She didn't believe in love, she believed in power. If Ju-won was distracted by Lily, it made him weak. But more importantly, it made Nubba look like a fool in the eyes of the other families. She called her father's most trusted cleaner, a man who specialized in making people disappear without a trace. I want her gone, Nubba commanded, her voice trembling with rage. Not just dead. I want her to suffer so he knows exactly what happens when he replaces me with trash. She knew Lily still visited her old neighborhood once a week to check on her younger sister. That would be the window. That would be the end of Lily. Lily insisted on going out. I can't live in this penthouse forever, Ju-won. My sister needs her medicine and she won't take it from your men. Ju-won didn't like it. His instincts were screaming. Min-ho and 3 others will follow you, discreetly. If you move more than 10 feet from them, I will lock you in this room myself. Lily agreed, unaware that Nabi's assassins were already positioned. As she exited the pharmacy in her old neighborhood, the sun was setting, casting long, jagged shadows across the alleyways. She felt the shift in the air, the way the street noise suddenly went quiet. A silver van screeched to a halt in front of her. 2 men jumped out, brandishing serrated knives. Lily froze, but before she could scream, the discreet guards Ju-won had sent materialized from the shadows. Muffled gunshots rang out, silenced rounds that dropped the first 2 attackers instantly. Lily was shoved into the back of Ju-won's reinforced SUV just as a second wave of men appeared. The message was clear. Nabi had declared war. And Ju-won, hearing the report over his headset at headquarters, felt a cold, murderous calm settle over him. Kill them all, he whispered into the mic, and bring Nabi to me. Lily was back in the penthouse, but the gilded cage now felt like a prison. The silence was punctuated by the incessant ringing in her ears, a phantom echo of the muffled gunshots. She sat on the edge of Ju-won's massive bed, staring at her hands which still trembled. The men who had tried to kill her, they were gone, erased. Ju-won entered the room, his clothes smelling faintly of smoke and something metallic. He didn't speak. He simply crossed the room, pulling her into his arms. His embrace was crushing, possessive, as if he were trying to merge her into his very being. "Are you hurt?" he murmured, his voice rough. He ran his hands over her, checking for any sign of injury. Lily shook her head, tears finally tracing paths down her cheeks. They had knives, they were going to. She couldn't finish the sentence. "This is your world, Ju-won, I don't belong here." He pulled back, holding her face in his hands. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, were ablaze with a raw, dangerous fury. "You belong with me, Lily, and anyone who tries to take you from me will pay a price you cannot fathom." The promise in his voice was not romantic. It was a death sentence for anyone who dared to threaten her. Nabi was brought to Ju-won's private interrogation room, a sterile, soundproof chamber beneath the city. She was bound to a chair, her designer clothes disheveled, her bravado slowly draining away as she faced the man she had betrayed. Ju-won stood before her, not touching her, but his presence was more menacing than any physical threat. "You tried to kill Lily," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "My men intercepted your assassins. They confessed everything." Nabi spat at his feet. "She's a whore, a distraction. You were supposed to marry me, Ju-won. We were going to rule this city." Ju-won merely tilted his head, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "You misunderstood. I was going to rule this city. You were merely a means to an alliance you destroyed the moment you plotted with Haneul, and now you've touched something that is mine." He signaled to his enforcers. "The agreement with her family is null and void. Send her home, but ensure she carries a message. Let them know the price of betrayal against me. A woman's face, after all, is her fortune in her world." He didn't need to specify. Nabi's screams, though muffled by the soundproofing, still reached the upper floors, a chilling testament to Ju-won's cold justice. Lily heard about Nabi's fate through hushed whispers among Ju-won's staff, the permanent disfigurement, the public shamming that left Nabi's family utterly disgraced and stripped of power. She felt a sick churn in her stomach. Ju-won hadn't just retaliated, he had annihilated. That night Ju-won came to her, his eyes still burning with the aftermath of his vengeance. He found her in the shower, the steam clinging to her skin. He joined her, fully clothed at first, then slowly, deliberately, shedding his garments until he was naked with her. He held her from behind, pressing his hard body against hers, his lips trailing kisses down her shoulder. "She won't bother you again," he murmured, his hands possessively cupping her breasts. "No one will." Lily leaned back into him, the warmth of his body a strange comfort against the terror. She was terrified of him, but also irrevocably drawn to the raw power he wielded. She knew then that there was no turning back. She was no longer just Lily, the waitress. She was Ju-won's woman, and in this dark kingdom that meant she was both protected and damned. His touch, usually so demanding, was tender tonight, a silent promise of protection and ownership. The shower became a confession, a silent covenant forged in steam and water. With Nabi's family disgraced and in hiding, a power vacuum opened in the Seoul syndicate. To solidify his claim, Ju-won organized a gala, a gathering of the 7 stars, the heads of the most powerful families. Everyone expected him to arrive alone or with a new, high-born political match. Instead, he walked into the marble ballroom with Lily on his arm. She looked breathtaking in a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk that contrasted beautifully with her skin. Ju-won had insisted on diamonds, heavy, cold stones that felt like a collar around her neck. As they entered, the room went silent. The clinking of crystal stopped. "Who is she?" the whispers hissed through the crowd. "The waitress from the restaurant." Ju-won didn't acknowledge the stares. He kept his hand firmly on the small of Lily's back, his thumb tracing slow, possessive circles. He led her straight to the head of the table. "This is Lily," he announced, his voice carrying a lethal edge. "She saved my life when my own blood tried to take it. She has my ear, my protection, and my name. Treat her accordingly." The message was clear. To disrespect Lily was to challenge Ju-won himself. While Ju-won negotiated in the smoking room, Lily was left to navigate the sharks in the ballroom. A group of older women, the matriarchs of the rival families, cornered her near the terrace. "You must be very talented," one woman sneered, her eyes scanning Lily's dress with disdain. To make a man like Ju-won forget centuries of tradition, but a man's lust is like a summer storm, intense but brief. What happens when the sky clears and he realizes you have no dowry, no lineage, and no place at this table? Lily felt the sting of their words, the familiar weight of being an outsider. But she wasn't the same girl who had scrubbed tables at El Etel. She looked the woman in the eye, her chin lifted. Ju-won didn't choose me for my lineage, Lily replied, her voice steady. He chose me because when his world was on fire, I was the only one who didn't try to warm my hands by the flames. He doesn't need a dowry, he owns the bank. The woman stiffened, but before she could retort, Ju-won appeared behind Lily. He didn't say a word, but the look he gave the group sent them scattering. He leaned down, whispering in Lily's ear. I heard that, my brave little bird. The adrenaline of the gala translated into a feverish intensity when they returned to the penthouse. Ju-won didn't even wait to reach the bedroom. He pressed Lily against the heavy mahogany door of his office, his hands tangling in her hair. You handled them well tonight, he growled, his mouth finding the sensitive skin of her neck. I saw the way they looked at you. They're afraid of you, Lily, because they know I would burn this city to the ground if you asked me to. Lily wrapped her legs around his waist, her heart thundering. The danger of his world was intoxicating, a drug she hadn't realized she was addicted to. I don't want the city, Ju-won, she gasped as he hiked up the silk of her dress. I just want you. The lovemaking was fierce and primal, a desperate attempt to drown out the reality of the targets on their backs. Ju-won moved with a hunger that seemed bottomless, his eyes locked on hers as if trying to memorize every detail of her expression. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay on the office rug, the moonlight spilling over them, Ju-won dropped a bombshell. Nabi's father hasn't accepted the message I sent, he said, his voice cold again. He's hiring mercenaries from overseas, people who don't care about our local codes. From now on you don't leave this building, not for your sister, not for anyone. Days turned into a monotonous cycle of luxury and paranoia. Lily stood on the balcony, watching the Seoul skyline through the high-tensile glass. Below she could see the black SUVs circling the block, Ju-won's perimeter. She had everything she could ever want, fine wine, silk robes, and a man who worshipped her body, but she was losing her soul. Her sister Maya had been moved to a private clinic under Ju-won's payroll. While she was safe and receiving the best care, Lily wasn't allowed to visit. It's a beacon for his enemies, Ju-won had explained, his voice hard. I saved your life so I could live mine, Ju-won, Lily shouted during a heated dinner. Not so I could become a ghost in your house. Ju-won slammed his glass onto the table, the crystal spiderwebbing under his grip. You are alive because I make it so. Nabi's father, Chairman Kang, has put a price on your head that would make a saint turn killer. You stay here because I cannot lose the only thing that makes me human. He walked over, his anger melting into a desperate, suffocating possessiveness. He kissed her forehead, but it felt like a brand. The attack didn't come from the front gate or the elevators. It came from above. At 3:00 a.m., while Ju-won was at the docks overseeing a shipment, a silent team of 4 mercenaries rappelled from a stealth helicopter onto the penthouse roof. They were professionals, ex-special forces hired by Chairman Kang. They bypassed the electronic security with military-grade scramblers. Lily was startled awake by the sound of glass shattering in the living room. She didn't scream, she remembered Ju-won's training. She rolled out of bed and reached for the suppressed pistol he had taught her to use, hidden in the nightstand. The bedroom door kicked open. A man in tactical gear, his face obscured by a gas mask, leveled a rifle at her. Lily didn't hesitate, she squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted her arm and the man slumped against the frame, but there were more. A flashbang detonated in the hallway, blinding her with white light and a high-pitched ring. Before she could recover, a heavy hand clamped over her mouth and a needle pierced her neck. The world dissolved into black. When Ju-won arrived 20 minutes later, the penthouse was a tomb. 3 of his guards were dead and 1 mercenary lay bleeding out in the bedroom. Lily was gone. The roar that left Ju-won's throat was primal, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony and rage. He didn't call the police. He called every soldier, every debt holder, and every informant in the city. Find them, he whispered into his phone, his eyes glowing with a demonic light. If a single hair on her head is harmed, I will turn this city into a graveyard. Hours later, his men tracked the signal to an abandoned shipyard owned by the Kang family. Ju-won led the charge himself, moving through the facility like a wraith. He found Lily tied to a chair in a cold, damp office, Chairman Kang standing over her with a blade. The fight was short and brutal. Ju-won didn't just kill Kang, he dismantled him. Once the room was secured, he fell to his knees in front of Lily, cutting her bonds. He stripped off his jacket to cover her shivering form, pulling her into a desperate, bruising embrace. "I have you," he sobbed into her neck, the first tears she had ever seen him shed. "I have you, I'm never letting you go again." In the wreckage of the shipyard, amidst the blood and steel, their reunion was a frantic, hungry confirmation of life, their bodies clinging together in a dark, primal need to erase the trauma of the night. The penthouse was no longer a home, it was a war room. After the rescue, Ju-won refused to let Lily out of his sight, even for a moment. He had moved her into his private study, where he sat at his desk, coordinating the systematic takeover of the Kang family's remaining assets. Lily sat on the velvet sofa, wrapped in his oversized cashmere sweater. The physical bruises were fading, but the psychological ones remained. She watched him, the way his jaw tightened as he ordered the liquidation of those who had helped her kidnappers. "You can't kill everyone, Ju-won," she said softly. He stopped typing and looked at her. His eyes were hollow. "In this world, fear is the only currency that doesn't devalue. If I don't respond with absolute ruin, the next person won't hesitate to take you." He walked over and knelt between her knees, resting his forehead against hers. "The council is meeting tomorrow. They want to strip my title for starting a war over a non-citizen. I'm going to give them an ultimatum. I'm making you my wife, formally, legally, under the laws of the 7 stars. Lily gasped, "They'll never accept me. I'm a foreigner, I'm a waitress." "You are the woman who saved the boss," Ju-won countered, his voice dropping to a low growl. "And tomorrow, you will be the woman they bow to, or I will burn the council table down with them sitting at it." The council chamber was a subterranean hall of dark wood and ancient tradition. 6 elderly men sat in high-backed chairs, their faces etched with disapproval. Ju-won entered, not in his usual suit, but in a traditional black hanbok that signaled his status as a clan head. Lily walked beside him, her head held high, wearing a dress of deep crimson, the color of blood and victory. Ju-won, the eldest member, began, his voice raspy. "You have broken the alliance. You have brought chaos to our streets for a woman of no standing. You are unfit." "Silence," Ju-won interrupted, the word echoing like a gunshot. He pulled a heavy ancient ring from his pocket and slid it onto Lily's finger. It was the seal of his family. "The Kang family is gone. Their territory is mine. I bring more power to this table today than any of you have in a decade." He stepped closer to the elders, his hand resting on the hilt of a decorative but very sharp ceremonial blade at his hip. "Lily is my wife. My heir will come from her. If any of you have a grievance with her bloodline, speak now so I can settle it with yours." The silence was absolute. One by one, the elders lowered their gazes. It wasn't respect, it was total, terrified submission. That night, back at the penthouse, the victory felt heavy. Ju-won stripped Lily of the crimson dress, his touch desperate and worshipful. He needed to feel her heartbeat against his to prove that they had survived the impossible. "You are my queen," he whispered against her skin, his movements slow and possessive. "And the world will just have to learn to bleed for you." Life as the wife of the head of the 7 stars was a radical shift from the restaurant floor. Lily now moved through the city in a motorcade of armored vehicles. She was no longer just a woman under protection. She was an executive of the organization, overseeing the legitimate side of Ju-won's empire, his hotels and real estate. But peace was an illusion. In the dark corners of a mental health facility on the outskirts of the city, Nabi sat in a room with no mirrors. Her face was a map of scars, hidden behind a silk veil she refused to remove. Ju-won had left her alive as a message, but he had underestimated the madness of a woman with nothing left to lose. Nabi had been secretly communicating with Haneul's old loyalists, the ones Ju-won had missed in his initial purge. They were the broken teeth, men who felt Ju-won had grown soft because of his love for a foreigner. "He thinks he is a king because he has a crown," Nabi whispered to the shadows. "But a king is only as strong as the heart he wears on his sleeve. We don't strike at him. We strike at the root. We destroy the waitress and we watch him crumble." Lily organized a high-profile charity gala for the clinic that treated her sister. It was her way of bringing light into Ju-won's dark world. Ju-won was hesitant, but he saw the joy it brought her and relented, doubling the security detail. The event was held at a colonial-style mansion. As Lily moved through the crowd, she felt a pair of eyes on her that didn't belong to the wealthy donors. A server, a young girl who reminded Lily of her former self, slipped her a tray of champagne. "Someone left this for you, madam," the girl whispered, pointing to a small velvet box on the tray. Lily opened it. Inside was a dried rose crushed into dust and a note written in familiar, jagged handwriting. Bloodlines never die, they just stain deeper. Before she could call for Min-ho, the lights in the ballroom flickered and died. A high-pitched screech echoed through the speakers, and the smell of ozone filled the air. The broken teeth had arrived, and they weren't looking for a ransom. They were looking for a sacrifice. Chaos erupted in the darkness, but this time, Lily didn't wait to be rescued. She remembered every lesson Ju-won had drilled into her. She pulled a compact pistol from her thigh holster, hidden beneath her gown. She felt a hand grab her shoulder. Instinct took over, she pivoted, driving her elbow into the attacker's throat and firing a shot into his foot. But she was outnumbered. A second man tackled her, and they tumbled down the service stairs into the cellar. The door slammed shut. The light from a single swinging bulb revealed a figure standing in the corner. It was Nabi, her veil discarded, her scarred face a mask of horror and hate. "You took everything," Nabi hissed, lunging with a jagged shard of glass. Lily dodged, the glass grazing her arm. "I didn't take your life, Nabi. You threw it away for a man who didn't love you." The fight was desperate and raw. Lily fought for her life, for her sister, and for the man who was currently tearing through the mansion's upper floors to find her. When Ju-won finally broke down the cellar door, he found Lily standing over a sobbing, defeated Nabi. Lily's dress was torn, her skin bruised, but her eyes were cold fire. Ju-won stopped, his gun leveled at Nabi, but he looked at Lily. "Do you want me to finish it?" Lily looked at the broken woman on the floor. "No, death is too easy for her. Send her back to the shadows. Let her live with the knowledge that she couldn't break us." That night the passion between Ju-won and Lily was different. It wasn't fueled by fear or ownership, but by an equal, burning intensity. They were two survivors, forged in the same fire, ready to rule the city together. In the months following the gala attack, a shift occurred in the hierarchy of Seoul. Lily was no longer referred to as the Waitress. The streets now called her the Black Rose. She had faced the vengeful fiancé and the council's judgment and emerged more lethal than the men who surrounded her. Ju-won watched her transformation with a mixture of pride and terror. He had wanted to protect her from the darkness, but she had stepped into it and shaped it to her will. She now sat in on the highest-level meetings, her perspective as an outsider providing Ju-won with insights his lifelong soldiers lacked. "They are loyal to the chair, Ju-won," she told him as they walked through the private gardens of their new estate. "But they are afraid of the man who sits in it. We need to give them a reason to be loyal to the family." She began implementing social programs and scholarships for the children of the syndicate's lower-level soldiers, a move that secured a ground-up loyalty that no amount of fear could buy. The last of Haneul's supporters and the remnants of the Kang family attempted one final, desperate coup. They targeted the shipping docks, Ju-won's primary source of revenue. But they didn't realize that Lily had built her own network of informants among the restaurant workers and cleaners of the city, the invisible people they ignored. The trap was sprung before the traitors even reached the water. Ju-won and his men moved with surgical precision, but it was Lily's intel that had mapped out their every move. When the last of the rebels was brought before them, Ju-won looked at his wife. He handed her his ceremonial blade. "You found them, Lily. You decide their fate." Lily looked at the men who had threatened her life and her sister's peace. She didn't flinch. Stripped of their rank, exiled from the city, if they return, their blood is on their own hands. It was a mercy that was more humiliating than death, proving that she and Ju-won were now untouchable. The tension of the war finally bled into a period of profound peace. In the quiet of their mountain villa, away from the city's grime, Lily shared the news that would change the Seven Stars forever. "I'm pregnant," she whispered one night as they sat by the fireplace. Ju-won froze. For a man who dealt in death, the concept of new life was overwhelming. He dropped to his knees, pressing his ear to her stomach, his hands trembling. "A son, a daughter." "A legacy," Lily replied. The lovemaking that followed was the most tender of their relationship. The dark, jagged edges of their romance had been smoothed into a deep, unbreakable bond. Ju-won worshipped her body not just as his lover, but as the vessel of his family's future. In the flickering firelight, the Mafia boss was just a man, and the Waitress was his entire world. The birth of the heir, a boy with Ju-won's eyes and Lily's spirit, was the final nail in the coffin of any opposition. The Seven Stars gathered for the child's naming ceremony. It was a display of power unlike any other. Nabi was a distant memory. a cautionary tale whispered to newcomers. The alliance with the old families was replaced by a new, more stable foundation built on the absolute authority of the Ju-won/Lily union. Ju-won stood before his people holding his son with Lily by his side. "The old ways died with my cousin," he announced. "We are no longer just a syndicate, we are a dynasty, and the woman who saved my life is the one who will lead us into the next century." The cheers that followed were genuine. Lily looked out over the crowd, seeing the waitresses and servers she had hired to staff the event. She caught the eye of one young woman and gave her a subtle nod, a reminder that in this world, even the invisible could become invincible. 10 years later, the restaurant El Etel had been bought by Ju-won and gifted to Lily. It was now the most exclusive spot in Asia, but the staff was treated like royalty. Ju-won and Lily sat at the same table where they had first met. He was older, with silver at his temples, but the way he looked at her hadn't changed. He still reached for her hand under the table, his thumb tracing the heavy diamond ring that had once felt like a collar, but now felt like a part of her skin. "Do you ever regret it?" Ju-won asked, his voice a low rumble. "Saving me." Lily looked at the scars on his hands, then out the window at the city they now owned together. She thought of the fear, the blood, and the midnight rescues. Then she thought of the passion that still burned between them every night, a fire that had never dimmed. "I didn't just save you, Ju-won," she said, leaning in to kiss him. "I found myself. I was a waitress waiting for her life to begin. You were a monster waiting for a reason to be human. We saved each other." Outside, the black SUVs waited in a silent perimeter, and the city hummed under their feet. The Black Rose and the Mafia boss, a dark romance written in blood, but sealed with a love that the world could never break.